evening, viewers out there. I welcome you to another episode of Climate Connect Podcast Nigeria. In this episode, we'll be discussing about nature-based solutions to the damaging effects of climate change. For viewers who are just joining us for the first time or who are just getting to know about this podcast for the first time, we usually discuss about climate-related issues, how it affects environment, how it's affecting the whole nation. So on this episode, we have our guest here, the distinguished Ambassador Richard Nyankume. It's nice having you here, sir.
Thank you so much.
Yes. So on previous episodes of this Climate Connect podcast, we've hosted you here before. We've talked about climate change. Viewers out there now know what is climate change. They know the effects, the damaging effect that climate change is having on the globe, not just Africa. Even though we around the sub-Saharan Africa, especially we in northern Nigeria, we're facing it because we're having desert encroachment and a lot of these issues. So in today's episode, you will be talking to our viewers on the nature-based solutions to this climate crisis that we're witnessing. So can we just know some of these nature-based solutions? What are the nature-based solutions to solving climate change?
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Ted. Thank you, the viewers out there, and I'm pleased to be here again on this episode. For some time, we have been having a conversation around climate change mitigation.
Yes.
And in one of the episodes, I mentioned that climate change mitigation goes hand in hand with climate change adaptation.
That's right.
So when we talk about mitigation, the first thing is that people think about technology.
Yes.
So forgetting that mitigation has more than one wing.
Yes.
It could come from a nature-based approach, or you come from a technological approach, or you come from a traditional practice approach. I'm glad today that we'll be discussing the topic nature-based solution because it's one of those key areas that the international climate system is beginning to consider. Conversations around this are also taking place at the Conference of the Parties and all of that. First of all, a nature-based solution refers to strategies or approaches that utilize the natural ecosystem, or approaches
in solving climate issues,
in addressing environmental or societal challenges. But for this discourse, since we're focusing on climate change, we'll be directing nature-based solutions, to those approaches that utilize natural processes to, solve climate change risk or disaster risk or other forms of environmental problems. Basically, when we're talking about nature-based, we're looking at how we utilize the approaches, we'll utilize nature, ecosystems to enhance biodiversity, to build environmental resilience, and to ensure the overall well-being of the human person. So that is what nature-based solution is about, just like the name speaks, nature-based.
Okay, so Ambassador, are nature-based solutions to climate crisis, are they devoid of the use of technology, or it has to do with minimal use of technology?
Yeah, nature-based solutions also oftentimes do not require technology. Because it's even more cost-effective because it, like I mentioned, it utilizes nature.
Yeah.
So you may not necessarily need to introduce technology into nature-based solutions. Maybe when we go further, we could have throw more light on why nature-based solutions evolved from natural approaches to ecosystems.
So our viewers out there might be very eager to know some of the examples of these nature-based solutions. Yeah. So can we just have some of them so that viewers out there get to know?
Yeah, thank you so much, Mr. Ted. We have a couple of nature-based solutions ranging from ecosystem restoration to urban green spaces, to setting up of coastal protection to agroecology and flood management. You and I know that in recent times, flood has been hitting really hard on communities. So a lot of people have asked questions. What kind of technologies do you use to mitigate flood, for example? And so that brings us to the conversation on nature-based approach. A lot of people are also having issues with our agri systems, especially now that the weather patterns are inconsistent.
Changed.
Things are changing, crops are dying out, farmers are not getting 100% yield from their farming practices as they did in the past. So all of that goes back. So, but let me take them one after the other to be more concise for people to understand. When we talk about restoring ecosystems, we are talking about a natural approach to ensuring that the ecosystem that was broken, is able to heal through natural processes. And this means that we do not need to go far. The solution is within. For instance, for us to plant more trees is a way of restoring the ecosystem, because we know trees act as carbon sink, and they absorb excess carbon from the atmosphere. They also help in purifying, air quality, and also serve as habitat, natural habitat for the wildlife and some of those forest resources. So you can see that you didn't use any technology, to plant trees. Those trees evolve to come from nature, and so you can, set up forests. Another one is about wetland restoration. Maybe perhaps you've heard of the savanna wetland, you've heard of the mangroves. Most of these wetlands are drying up, so we can, put our attention on revamping our wetlands so that wetlands will help us to absorb water. Most times, those things can go to the extent of having floodplains. So those approaches that take, carbon. Wetlands also contribute in taking carbon from the atmosphere. So these are natural processes. So when we talk about restoration, we are referring to that. Quickly, let me look at urban green spaces. Right now, the global conversation is very much focused on urban green spaces. And what this means is that we should begin to consider to set more green parks. We should have green buildings, plant more flowers, set up gardens, vegetable gardening around our homes, and build houses that have trees, and also introduce little urban forests within trees. If you take a look at our estate systems now, you will discover that most times people buy estate land, and the first thing they do is to remove
all the trees.
So if you remove all the trees, imagine an estate that has up to 45 to 50 buildings, does not have up to 10 trees. That poses a risk. So for nature-based solutions in terms of green spacing is for us to ensure that every household at least has 2 trees or 3 within their vicinity, so that it helps.
So Ambassador Richard, how would you encourage this restoration of ecosystem using natural-based solutions? How would you encourage that in and around the world, in Nigeria and then across the globe also? What do you think local communities should, get deeply involved for this to happen?
All right, so I think thank you so much. First of all, it's awareness. When people become aware, then there is a likelihood that their awareness will track, it give birth to some results. Something
it alters their behavior towards
behavioral change. So the first thing we need to know is that we need to create awareness, and people need to know, and that's exactly what we are also doing here, creating awareness. I was about to talk about agroecology, for instance, which is a low-hanging fruit. Agricultural practices that are nature-based. For instance, when we're doing crop rotation, or we're mixing trees and crops, in our farming systems, and then or using organic farming approaches. It means that we are helping communities to utilize nature.
Yes.
So they don't need to go out looking for technology that is very expensive, but they rely on nature. For instance, fertilizer, the chemical fertilizer that is produced in the companies or in the manufacturing companies is expensive.
Those NPK
But yes,
fertilizers,
the NPKs,
urea and the rest of
urea,
them,
they're expensive.
very expensive.
Apart from being expensive, they also attempt to alter the natural ecosystems, the natural elements in the soil.
Yes.
But if you get hold of droppings from animals, for instance, from chickens, from pigs, from cows, and all of that, and put it on your farm, you're going to get a similar yield to when chemical fertilizers were deployed. Yes. So that tells you that the natural system is even more cost effective. So for us, if we teach our people that nature-based solution is the way to go to combat climate change, yes, by awareness and pointing at the things that they need to know, for instance, transforming waste and then using the pit for meat, for manure and all of that, it will go a long way. And then also the government have a role. Government have also to help us do policies that will ensure that we adopt more of nature-based solutions than just overlooking it and pursuing technology single-handedly.
All right. So our viewers out there, you have listened to Ambassador Richard. He has talked about how we can mitigate climate change using a nature-based solution. He's talked about restoring ecosystems, agroecology, and lots more. So I have a very simple question for the ambassador. It's simple, but it's something that many viewers out there will also like to ask him if the opportunity was given. So in all of this, like if you look at northern Nigeria, there's desert encroachment. We're losing our arable land, the land that we should use to farm and have food security, to desert. The lands are becoming desert. So how do we ensure that these nature-based solutions you've talked about are sustainable? Given the fact that in northern Nigeria, when you plant trees, you know that since the rainfall, the range is shortening, the seasons where we have rainfall is beginning to shrink down. How do we ensure that these nature-based solutions are sustainable and then serve communities for the better long term?
All right, thank you so much also for that. For northern region, which is a semi-arid region,
yes,
I think trees and wetlands will go a long way, which are natural, nature-based solutions, will go a long way to contribute to restoring
our lands,
yes, that are degraded and the desert is fast encroaching. For instance, there are species of trees that can withstand arid regions.
Yes, they are drought-resistant species.
Yes. Those are the kind of trees we should plant. Okay. Recent times, I'm going around and I'm seeing a lot of people planting trees. But the question is, what kind of trees? If you pick trees that should survive in the riverine area and bring them to the northern part of the continent, then those trees are likely to die or pass out as soon as the dry seasons come in. So, but when you plant drought-resistant trees, yes, then those trees have capacity to retain water that they use during the dry seasons, and that will help to fight desertification. Recently, or some years back, the African Union set up what they call the Great Green Wall Project, yes, which cuts across countries in Africa. The idea was to create a formidable forest that will be able to fight desertification. In the absence of trees, winds can pick on the soil.
Yes.
And so in the presence, when so much trees are found in an area, it will be difficult for that area to become so arid and phase out. So for me, my suggestion would be that one of the things we should do, nature-based approach to fighting or combating desertification in northern Nigeria, should be to plant more drought-resistant trees and to see how we can expand our wetlands, yeah, to sustain, the wetness of the soil to address some of the issues.
Yes. So recently we had an issue in Borno State, Maiduguri, where the floods came from broken dam and then it overwhelmed the city. So looking at nature-based solutions, what do you think how should communities prepare to, if this kind of a situation arises again, how do we naturally prepare for such disasters?
All right, so thank you so much for that again. For flood prevention,
yes,
and from flood preparedness, these two go hand in hand.
Yes.
If you want to prevent flood,
you need to
take some measures to put certain things in place so that when flood comes, it will be able to address. For instance, when we begin to build flood barriers,
yes,
or we set up flood plains,
yes,
or like I said earlier, when we think of having wetlands, so that when there is excess water, the wetlands absorb the water, and that is their natural state. So if you also build flood barriers, there is a limit to which some water could cross into some spaces. For instance, people said that water was released from the dam.
Yes.
And the water,
allegedly.
Yeah, allegedly, and it came to overpower Borno State.
Yes.
Yeah. So if the government can take preventive measures, it will be to build flood defenses around those areas that was suspected, to have indicated that water came through. So for preparedness, it's about, supporting the people by giving them knowledge, giving them ideas that they can do, what they can do to find their way out of
such a situation.
Right now, I know a lot of people in Borno must have gone for swimming classes. Yeah, because once beaten, twice shy. Yeah. So, of course, if you were in Borno State and you could not navigate through the water, something gives you sense that you have to go for swimming lessons. And then right now, a lot of people are beginning to know, just like I said in one of our conversations on this channel, that you need to have 3 things in your room. Something that can help you navigate through a flood. For instance, a fully inflated tube, or a jerry can, or you do set up some PVC platforms and keep it by your corner so that in case there is flood, you can use it to find your way out. So you can see that in terms of preparedness, it's about the people. In terms of prevention, it's about what government can do, which is capital intensive, to be able to mitigate a flood. But you can see that all of these are within the realm of nature-based solutions.
Okay, so that leads us to the next section of our podcast, which is call to action. What actions do you think, because you have highlighted some very key and sensitive points here, that we need to create awareness. People need to be aware of some of these solutions. So what is your call to action? What do you think government should do, corporate organizations, businesses, and then even we individuals living in these communities that have been currently even being affected by climate change?
Yeah, thank you so much. Also, it's interesting that the call to action has to go, holistic. First is that the people who should know. Right now, the awareness we're doing is part of it. So I'm calling on civil society organizations to see if they can participate in, taking this world out, telling people about nature-based approaches on the agroecology, in terms of coastal protection, in terms of ecosystem restoration. And then also I'm inviting every man and woman of goodwill in Nigeria or elsewhere to also begin to take the message seriously, the message of planting trees, the message of going into crop rotation and other agricultural practices that are more organic, and also switching to consumption of more organic foods. And then the final one, call to action, of course, is the mega one, is about the government. Government needs to ensure that new policies or obsolete policies are revised to be able to incorporate nature-based solutions into everything we're doing. Urban developers and estate developers need to be tasked to ensure that anywhere they are building urban green spaces, regulations are followed.
Yes.
Trees are planted, there should be a green space, and there should be other things that will help to lower atmospheric temperatures and also take carbon from the atmosphere, as well as government need to set up very powerful enforcement mechanisms so that when policies are being implemented, someone has to
follow up on them,
to
make sure they are
that where laws are made, those laws are enforced. And where people are found wanting, they should face the music that is the wrath of the law. I think with all of this, people being aware, communities being switching to this, and government also doing their part, we will all be able to transition into nature-based solutions that will help us to combat climate change.
All right, thank you very much, Ambassador. So before we close for this episode, what message do you have for CSO in terms of encouraging CSOs to also advocate for some of these changes to be made? Like you mentioned, the situation where town builders, town planners, people build houses and then there are no green spaces where you can find nature there, like trees, and then even maybe bare floor with grasses on them. So how do you think, what is the role of CSO? How do you think CSO should go about advocating for some of these policies?
Yeah, so the first thing about it is about advocacy. Advocacy is in various forms. It could be from print media or from electronic media or face-to-face. So CSOs are positioned to be able to drive a serious advocacy for the transition into nature-based solutions.
Yes.
And this means that they can organize public rally, public hearings, they can stimulate actions locally by meeting lawmakers and also holding policy briefs, designing policy briefs and holding dialogue workshops with the key actors to be able to show them this. And they, CSOs themselves, need capacity in this area because you cannot give what
you don't have.
So if you have the capacity to speak on this, it will be easier for them to close in the gap.
Well, thank you, Ambassador Richard. It's a pleasure having you on this podcast. I'm sure many of our viewers out there will have learned a lot from this brief time with you. Thank you. We look forward to seeing you in our next episode, Ambassador.
Sure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dave.
Yes, so to our viewers out there, you've heard so much from Ambassador Richard. There are nature-based ways which we can actually help our environment cope with these climate situations that we'll find ourselves in. So stay tuned to this channel, subscribe and like, share with your friends, family and associates. See you next time. Thank you.